Hello and welcome to the Solo PvE Power Tempest build. You've seen from the introduction which stuff this is good for and which stuff this is not particularly good for, although you may find with some tweaking, with some changes, you can use it in all sorts. But primarily, this is a really easy to use, super powerful Solo Tempest build. Let's have a look at the weapon straight away, at the armor straight away, shall we? Okay, so all of the pieces want to all of them be Berserkers. Now, Berserkers is when you've got power, precision, and ferocity. Power is the damage scale, precision is the accuracy of your hits, and ferocity is how hard you hit, if you wondered what those three did. Berserkers is the name that you're looking for the pieces of armor. You want that on all your armor. You want it on all your trinkets as well. Berserkers on everything, okay? Now then. The rune I've gone for is the rune of the Ogre. If you wanted to use a meta power build, you would go for the rune of the Scholar. Let me explain the difference between the rune of the Ogre and the rune of the Scholar, and then tell you why I've gone for the Ogre. Points 1 to 5 of the Scholar are exactly the same as points 1 to 5 of the Ogre. So the only difference between the meta and this Ogre rune is 0.6. Now, with the Scholar, 0.6, you would have plus 5% damage instead of 4, but it's conditional. It's conditional on staying above 90% health. Now, if you remember, and I'll be reminding you a few times in this build of this fact because it's critical to it, this build is a solo PvE Power Tempest build. In other words, you can't rely on anyone else coming and helping you, giving you boons, giving you regen, giving you health, none of that kind of stuff happening. Of course, if you're playing with the guild or times that you do team up, that'll be a great boon to you. But this is designed to be that you be able to go out on your own solo PvE and not have to worry. The problem with Scholars then is that you will nearly always be dropping below that 90% threshold. And every time you do, you will lose that 5% damage. With the Ogre, that 4% damage is consistent. It doesn't matter what happens, you will always have that extra damage on you. The other thing that Scholar gives is 125 ferocity. By having the Ogre, you lose that ferocity, but this build is going to give you in excess of over 600 extra ferocity in the build anyway. So I'm not worried about losing that. And instead, I get to summon a rock dog. And let me tell you, it's far from gimmicky. It manages to take aggro, can draw enemies away from you, and I tell you, it fights really well. You'll be surprised how much damage that rock dog can do. Now, sometimes in certain group settings, they don't want you to have a rune that does a summon. But again, I remind you, this is a solo PvE Power Tempest build. You're not expecting for most of the time to be in a high-end group with this build. As a result, to have that dog taking aggro, causing problems, and the 60-second cooldown is from the summons. So it's summoned, and while it's fighting, that cooldown is ticking down. That will regularly get you that rock dog out, and you're going to be really pleased with it. But if you're not, feel free to take out this rune of the Ogre to put in either the meta, which is rune of the Scholar, or another rune that you think would be better suited to either your style of play or to a power build. Let's go to the weapons. Now, I've gone for Sceptre and Warhorn here, which is very common in Power Tempest builds. I really like it too. I think the skills that it offers are great. For my other swap set, I'm going for Dagger and Focus. Feel free to use whatever you like as your swap set. It doesn't make an awful lot of difference. It's more about play style as far as I'm concerned, especially in solo PvE like we're doing, and especially as it's such an easy rotation is what I'm looking for. But I would ask that you find that the main set of weapons is your Sceptre and Warhorn You'll see why later, but I think you'll really like it. Okay, let's also take account, well, for a start, if I haven't mentioned it before, Berserkers again. You don't want anything else but Berserkers in this, in these weapon sets. Even in the swaps, you don't want them anything else but Berserkers. The sigil I've gone for in one hand is Sigil of Force. That is just, you would not have a power build and not have the Sigil of Force. You can't stack them, so you can't have more than one on your weapons, even if it's on a different weapon, but brought out at the same time, it won't stack. So you do need one of them, you can't use two of them. On my other, then, I've gone for Sigil of the Night. Now, there's a few different ones you could have gone. I nearly went for the Sigil of Air, which will give you a bolt of lightning when you crit. And that's a really nice one as well, especially for this kind of build. But the one I'm going for in the end is Sigil of the Night. That gives me a guaranteed 3% extra damage no matter what is happening. It's not conditional on anything. But then an additional 7% at night. Now that might sound limiting to you, but the way I look at it is this. The day-night cycle for Guild Wars is not the day-night cycle for real life. It turns over much, much faster. And as a result, you might find yourself in a situation where you started in the day, but it quickly becomes night. Or it could be a story element that involves night that you didn't realize till you started playing. And so to have that extra boost of another 7% on top of that 3%, making 10% in just one offhand is fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. But if you don't enjoy it, feel free to swap that sigil, not the Sigil of Force, but this sigil, for any other one that you feel suits you better. Okay, let's go to the build. The build trait lines I've gone for are Tempest, Air, and Water. Let's start with the Water, because if you wanted pure damage, pure power, you would change this Water for Fire. That would give you extra damage and extra things to play with that would pump out more damage than this build will do. But I need to remind you again, this is a solo PvE Power Tempest build. It is assuming that most of the time you won't have help. So I've gone with Water here to have a few elements thrown in that will help us with our survivability. After all, we are the light armor users and the weakest of the lot. This is the most squishy class of all. So to have something in Water here that will help with our health and our regen, I think is wise, really. But again, if you felt that really I'm being too protective here, too much worried about the damage I'm going to take, feel free to just change that out for Fire instead. Okay, so as always with the trait lines, you have 3 skills that you can't do anything about. They're set ones as far as the line is concerned. The ones I can choose, I've gone here for piercing shards. Vulnerability you inflict has increased duration. So every time you do vulnerability on someone, it has an increased duration. Vulnerability is good because it lowers their defenses against your attacks. Secondly, deal increased damage to vulnerable foes. So not only will their vulnerability last longer, and they're weakened against you, but you'll also find that your damage is increased by 10%. Now, if you were in Water attunement at the time, which I'll be honest, you'll hardly ever be in Water attunement unless you're desperately low on health and need to build it back up. But if you were, your damage would then increase to 20% on vulnerability. Overall, that's a good mix there. Next is this, deal increased damage when your health is above the threshold. Okay, so you're doing another 10% when your health is above 75, much better than the Scholar's 90%. So while you're above 75%, you can do increased damage there of 10%. So you notice that although I'm in Water, and I'm going to be using Water for a bit of survivability, I'm still looking for little damage increases here and there to keep the damage high. Blocking or evading an attack heals you. Now, it doesn't matter what attunement you're in at the time when you're blocking or you're evading. So whatever skills that you're using that manage to evoke a block, or you manage to do an evade, you'll be healed when that happens. Lastly, Soothing Mist is more effective, 100% more effective, so you can double the effect. For this one, we do need to go back and look more closely at the set one, which is this one, Soothing Mist. You and nearby allies recover health while you're attuned to Water. So you swap into Water, you'll have some Water skills allowing you to keep on attacking slightly weaker, but inducing some health help at that point. And this gives you 1600 health over 10 seconds smoothing miss, but it will be doubled to 3200 health because of that one that doubles it there. Okay, that's your defensive line, if you like, for being in solo PvE Power Tempest build. This is your attack line for sure. 3 skills that you can do nothing about, but these 3 are really useful actually. I mean, that one gives you moving faster when you attune to air. Now, most of the time you will be in air, so this helps your movement speed to get around a bit, to be able to avoid those big nasty red circles that come in all sorts of different guises. This one strikes your target with a bolt of lightning when you're tuning to air, so when you go into air it will trigger. It also triggers when you do an overload, and in both circumstances it inflicts 10 3/4 seconds of vulnerability, which, if you remember, we saw some nice synergy up there with vulnerability. You will be doing extra damage when they've got this vulnerability, and they'll always have this vulnerability when you go into air and when you use your overload, which is going to be your main damage dealer. The next one you can do nothing about is Elementalist training. Gain ferocity and gain additional ferocity while attuned to air. Air weapon skills get a reduced recharge. Like I said, most of the time you'll be aiming to stick with your air skills. Not all the time, there's a few others in the other attunements that you'll like, but as much as you can you'll want to stay in air. This means you'll get 150 ferocity plus an extra 150 for being in air. So that's 300 ferocity just for being in air. Plus, those air skills will have a reduced recharge. So they're pretty powerful ones, considering they're set ones. Normally those set ones can be a comme c'est comme ça kind of effect, but here they're fantastic. Let's have a look at the ones you can choose now. Gain ferocity based on your precision. Well, you've seen that we've got Berserker's armor right the way through, so we've got a lot of precision going on, and on your trinkets and on your weapons. So gain ferocity, in other words, hit even harder based on the precision you've got. That's very nice. Now this one is a defensive skill, even though it's in my attack line. So I'll give you an option to this one in just a moment if you wanted to be more attacking. This one gains a boon when you cast a glyph. Now we've got 3 glyphs going on, and this will give you an extra boon whenever you cast those glyphs, depending on which attunement you're in. You can get protection, you can get might, you can get regen, or you can get extra swiftness if you want. The extra swiftness doesn't really help because you've already got 25% movement increase there, so that doesn't really help. So really, when you are triggering one of these glyphs, it's better to perhaps not be in air at the time, but that's completely with you. It is a defensive skill. It reduces recharge as well. So your summons is reduced, your electrical storm is reduced, and your healing is reduced. Just 16 seconds on that. Those extra things that it brings, for example, take this one. If we went into water and we were going to do this glyph, for a start, it's only 16 seconds before it's ready again. That's nothing. The healing is 6,494, but the extra boon that you're getting with that trait line means 23¼ seconds of 3,000 more heal. So in other words, you'll be regenning the whole time that this is reloading, recharging, which is a fantastic little defensive thing to have. But if you felt I'm overdoing the defense now, considering I've got the water line, if you felt I'm overdoing it, drop down to this one, Raging Storm. Critically striking a foe, which you'll do a lot with Berserkers. Striking a foe grants Fury, and you gain extra ferocity when you get Fury. So if you felt you're already defensive enough that I've overdone it by using that one, then please just switch down to that one. Finally, Fresh Air. Now, Fresh Air is the skill that makes this whole build so offensive. Many other types of build that are similar to this would be called Fresh Air build, and the airline would be almost identical, and this is the reason why. It recharges your air attunement, this one, on a critical hit. Remember, we talked how critical hits are done more often because you've got Berserkers. And if you wanted to drop that defensive one down to this attacking one, you would also increase by 20% your critical chance, but it is only after you've critically hit already. But a critical hit will recharge this, which recharges your overload and gain a ferocity of another 250. So by now, the ferocity you've lost by scholars is completely forgotten. You're well over 600 now of extra ferocity just from this airline. But this is the beauty of this build. When you critically hit, this activates, which recharges your air, recharges your overload. You go again with your overload of lightning, of air, your most offensive damage that you can do. That's the reasoning behind this line. Finally, Tempest. 3 skills again that you can't do anything really about. The ones I've chosen. Overloads grant an aura based on your attunement. So whenever you do the overload, you will get an aura. If it's the lightning one, which is the one you'll be going for more often than not, the one you should aim for because it's the most damaging, you will also be giving them a 4-second aura shock for any enemies. It says each attacker, there's no limit there. Each attacker that attacks you will be getting shocked if they attack you during the overload. Your options were extra vigor here, and option here was super speed, but you're not really doing anything that helps with the super speed, and you have other things, as you'll see in a minute, that give you vigor. You don't need to trait it specially. So this one giving you that shocking aura when you're using your overload is very helpful, especially if they're trying to interrupt your overload. Being able to stun the attackers when they're trying to stop your overload is very helpful indeed. Next, invigorating torrents. Auras you grant also grant regeneration and vigor. You could have gone for this one. Get stability and swiftness while you're doing your overload. It's very nice. Having stability while you're trying to do your overload is very helpful. And you would have that move around if you weren't in air. If you're in air, you're getting 25% increase anyway. But if you weren't in air and you're using an overload, that's helpful. The reason I've gone for this one is because this is my main offensive line. These are my main offensive skills. This one I'm looking to use as soon as it's recharged. I'm looking to use that overload of air. So I'm not looking on my utilities to really add much DPS to that. Not for solo PvE power builds. So I've put in here 2 shouts that give me 2 auras. Okay, this frost aura will chill the enemy, reducing their recharge rate and their movement, but it will also give me the regeneration, helping me evade more, and regeneration, healing me more. So I've got the shocking aura, reducing my damage, making the enemy's skills recharge slower, their movement slower, increased health, and this regeneration of my movement here so that I can get those evades in, which, as you've seen earlier, the evades help me as well. This does similar. Regeneration, again the vigor to make sure my endurance here is recharged faster, and a bit of protection. And what's great about this is it reflects projectiles. So reflecting projectiles that are fired at me at the same time from 5 different targets. So these are 2 defensive skills which I'm traiting by using invigorating torrents. They also cause some damage, but I haven't got them there for the damage. I've got them as defensive skills. And then finally, Transcendent Tempest. Time to attain singularity is reduced. So I get a 33% reduction in this being recharged, which is good for when I don't crit. When I crit, that's 100%. But when I'm not critting, it's reduced, so it's still going to be quick. And I'll get 7% more damage as soon as that overload has finished. So that's the build. Let's go to the skills. I'm not going to go through each of the skills of the fire and of the other, and of the water and of the earth. Suffice to say that you can get some really good power boost on that if you wanted from might. The ones that have got lots of burning involved, you are not going condition damage, you are going power, so you're not too worried about what the others do. Use them if you want for fun, but don't expect miracles from them. You haven't gone condition. That one will give you the might. You switch to water when you're in trouble and you need healing. This one will cause more vulnerability, another 20 seconds of vulnerability if you wanted to make use of that and exploit that for the enemy's weakness. But otherwise, you're looking at these two in particular with both healing and regeneration, and then that one causing a water field as well with a bit of healing. But these two are the ones to really help you if you're finding yourself under extreme pressure. Then when it comes to Earth, you've got another magnetic aura there. You've seen how we've traded magnetic auras already. That gives you a magnetic aura, while this would blind enemies for 10 seconds as well. So a nice blind, a nice shield, then get back out of Earth. But most of the time you're going to be here using these skills. Nice 6-second blind for every 8 seconds. Imagine being able to blind your enemy from being able to attack you for 6 seconds out of every 8. That's incredible. But the one that's going to cause you the most pleasing is, now have a look at this and you won't believe that this slow moving one direction orb is actually super powerful, because in a bunch of enemies that's firing off missiles every quarter second to hit. And if it's only a few enemies, it'll be multiple hits. One enemy, it'll do a bunch of hits. You'll be astonished how much damage that skill there does. But whatever you're using, you're keeping your eye on this, because as soon as that's ready, that's what you want to redo and have that raining down with its damage. Over here, we've talked about the glyphs already. Reduced to 16 seconds, that's pretty good. What are our others? 20 seconds there. 18 seconds there, but with much less. I mean, that removes conditions, but that's pulsed. 25 seconds there. And then this one's 25 seconds, but it does give you a heal per cast. It's half the health of this one, but it does give you a healing per cast as well. But we've tuned for this one, we've traded for this one, so this is the one to go for. Lightning Storm, this is super powerful too. You'll be amazed, just like that one, really does. That's the big hitter. That's the one you really want to be using as much as you can, this one in between. But this Storm is surprisingly effective as well. Lastly, this is the one that you could change a bit. So I've gone for Glyph of Elementals, and it can bring up, depending on what you're attuned to, a different elemental to help you. This one, for example, is this lightning creature here, and can do extra damage and stuns and things like that. You can change it for any of the others by changing your attunement. The only other one to put in place for this build would be the Fiery Greatsword. But if you put the Fiery Greatsword in and you use it, it will change all of these skills. So you won't be able to use these as regularly if you're using the Fiery Greatsword. It is very offensive, it is very good, more offensive so than these Glyphs of Elementals. But for me, I prefer to have these skills working for me, and certainly this Overload. And that's what we're built for and traded for more than any of what's going on in your elite. So that is the end of the build, and I think you'll find it super powerful. I think you'll find that there's a whole bunch of elements in there that will help you with survivability for this Solo Power Tempest build. I hope it's been helpful. Bye-bye for now.